Hi guys, how you doing? It's Abba, as if you didn't know, that's with me. And this is, we're going to continue on with the girls with Ellen Tebbits. And we started where we left off. I think the girls were making dresses with this kind of material. Okay? Well, we're going to go on now. For the next few weeks, the girls talked of nothing but the first day of school, when they would dress alike. Austin even changed the part in her hair from the left side to the right side so that she and Ellen would look more alike. Again, there's Ellen Tebbits. They agreed that they would both wear white bobby socks since it would be their first day in fourth grade. And their mother said they could wear black slippers. After that, they would have to wear their everyday Oxfords. Mrs. Tebbits cut out Ellen's dress first. When it was ready to try on, Austin came over to watch. It fitted nicely, and Ellen twirled around in her flared skirt. Even though it was without a collar and sleeves and the skirt was not hemmed, the girls could see it was going to be a lovely dress. "I wish Mother would hurry up with mine," said Austin. But Mrs. Allen did not sew as quickly as Mrs. Tebbits. She pinned and basted and stopped frequently to read the directions. She spent a lot of time ripping. Sometimes she stuffed the whole thing in a drawer and did not sew for several days. The girls became more and more anxious. Ellen asked about the dress so many times she felt it would not be polite to ask anymore. Austin stopped mentioning it altogether. Then, the evening before school started, Austin telephoned Ellen. "Guess what?" she said. "My mother is hemming my dress this very minute, and it'll be ready in time for tomorrow. I thought she wasn't going to get it finished, but she worked all afternoon, and Bruce and I fixed dinner so that she could sew. Don't forget to wear your white socks." The next morning, Ellen dressed carefully and did not squirm while her mother brushed her hair and tied her sash in a nice fat bow. She twirled around to admire the fullness of her skirt and peered over her shoulder at her sash. She liked her new dress more than any new dress she had ever owned. She could hardly wait to walk into her new fourth grade room with Austin. She walked as quickly as she could to Austin's house. She walked because her sash might come untied if she ran. She tap danced, hopped 1, 2, 3 on Austin's porch, and waited for Austin to come out. She waited a long time. Hop 1, 2, 3, slap down, slap down. Finally, Austin came out with a piece of toast in her hand. "Well, come on," she said angrily. Ellen stared. Austin's dress did not look a bit like hers. The material was the same, but everything else was different. Austin's skirt sagged at the bottom. The sleeves did not puff the way Ellen's did, and the collar did not quite meet under Austin's chin. The buttons were sewed on over snaps instead of buttoning through like real buttonholes. The waist was too tight and gap between the buttons. Worst of all, there was no sash to tie a nice bow. "But Austin," said Ellen, "there's supposed to be a sash." Austin finished the last bite of toast and licked her fingers. "Well, there isn't going to be on mine. I'm bigger than you are, and Mother had to allow extra material on the sides of the dress. And then she made a mistake in cutting the sleeves, and then when she got through, there wasn't any material left for a sash. Mother says I'm too plump to wear a wide sash anyways." Oh, that's too bad. Ellen didn't know what to say. She was terribly disappointed. She supposed she ought to offer to take off her sash, but it was such a lovely one. Besides, her mother had stitched it to her dress at the sides, so she would not lose it. "Well, I think you might take off your sash," said Austin. "We're supposed to look like twins, you know. It was all your idea in the first place." "I can't take it off. It's sewed to my dress," said Ellen. Austin did not answer. The girls walked in an unhappy silence. When they were half a block from school, the bell rang. "Come on," said Ellen, glad to have an excuse to speak. "We'd better run." She started to run, and as she did, Austin grabbed the end of her sash. The bow came untied. Austin laughed. "Oh, Austin, now look what you've done," said Ellen, trying to retie the bow. It was hard to tie a bow she could not see. Austin did not offer to help. Austin seemed to feel better after that. She even took Ellen's hand as they hurried down the hall. Ellen squeezed her hand in excitement. The first day in a new room, was so exciting. She thought the boys and girls in the third grade room looked very young. In the fourth grade room, the children were busy deciding which seat to sit in. What are you dressed that way for?" demanded Linda Mulford. "Maybe they think they're just like twins," said Joanne. "Girls always want to be twins," said George. "I think it's dumb." "Where's your sash, Austin?" asked Amelia. I don't see why everyone has to make such a fuss just because we happen to have dresses made out of the same material. Otis came over to inspect the dresses. Look at the monkeys, he yelled. Leaning forward and dangling his arms, he bent his knees and walked like a monkey. Cut it out, Otis, said Austin. You think you're funny, but you're not. Otis scratched himself under one arm and pretended to look for fleas. Don't pay any attention to him, said Ellen. Otis hopped around in front of her and scratched himself under the other arm. Oh, said Ellen, and she turned around. Then Mrs. Gittler, their new teacher, came into the room and asked the boys and girls to take their seats. When Ellen started to hurry to a back seat, Austin took hold of her sash, and as Ellen walked, it came untied. Austin, I wish you'd stop untying my sash, snapped Ellen. I didn't untie it, said Austin. I held on to it, and you untied it when you walked. Ellen was so upset she didn't answer. By that time, all the back seats were taken, so she chose a seat by the window. Austin took a seat by the blackboard. Ellen was sorry Austin didn't want to sit beside her anymore. She really didn't want to quarrel with her best friend. It was not until lunchtime that the real trouble began. When the class crowded into line at the door to wait for the bell to ring, Ellen knew that Otis and Austin were standing behind her. Hey, quit shoving, she heard Otis say. Someone bumped against Ellen. Excuse me, said Austin. Well, you don't have to push. There's plenty of room. It's silly getting mad over a sash, thought Ellen. I'm going to pretend nothing has happened. She turned around and asked Austin to eat lunch with her in the cafeteria when she felt someone grab her sash and yank. This time Ellen was really angry with Austin. Without stopping to think, she whirled around with her hand out. She turned so quickly that Austin, who was laughing, didn't have time to dodge. Before Ellen realized what was happening, her hand hit Austin's face. Austin gasped. Her face turned red and her eyes filled with tears. Ellen stared horrified. The class began to buzz with whispers. Mrs. Gittler clapped her hands. Boys and girls, I don't like this talking. If I hear any more, we shall go back to our seats until we can be quiet. Ellen had slapped her best friend. How could she have done such a terrible thing, even though it was an accident? She was so shocked she could not speak. The Substitute Rat, Chapter 6. When the bell rang, the class filled into the hall. Embarrassed and ashamed, Ellen walked to the cafeteria and bought her lunch. She knew everyone was talking about her. With flaming cheeks, she carried her tray to a corner table and ate alone. It did not take her long to finish her lunch. She was not hungry. She returned to her new fourth grade room and took her reader out of her desk and started to read straight through it. After the first page, she sat twisting her hair and thinking. The more Ellen thought, the more unhappy she became. What bothered her most was the question of who should apologize first. Should she tell Austin she was sorry, or should Austin tell her that she was sorry? Of course, slapping someone was worse than untying a sash, but just the same, if Austin had left Ellen's sash alone, she would not have had her face slapped. Yes, it was Austin who really started it. Ellen decided Austin should apologize first. Ellen would smile encouragingly at her and give her every chance to say she was sorry. Then Ellen would say she had not really meant to slap at all and they would be best friends again. Now it was time to start. Ellen went outdoors and found Austin and Linda playing hopscotch. She walked slowly past the girls, but they were having so much fun they didn't notice her. At least Ellen thought they didn't notice her. Austin leaned forward and threw a pebble. And I was going to have a party and invite her, but I'm not now, she said to Linda. I don't blame you a bit, said Linda. She thinks she's smart just because her dress is nicer than yours. It was no use. When Ellen went home from school that day, she changed her clothes and put the monkey dress behind all the other dresses in her closet. She hoped her mother would forget about it. Then she sat on the front steps, just in case Austin might decide to come over and say she was sorry. The shadow of the maple tree grew longer and longer, and still there was no sign of Austin. When Ellen finally went into the house, she listened for Austin's Hop 1, 2, 3 and dreaded going to school the next day. She was practically an outcast, a terrible person who had slapped her best friend, even if it was her best friend's fault. If only she could begin her life over again someplace where no one knew her. Mother, do I have to go to Rosemont School, she asked. Couldn't I go to Glenwood? No, of course not, answered her mother. We don't live in that district. Whatever put such an idea into your head? Oh, nothing, said Ellen, wondering if she had any friends. We have to stop here. Mwah. I love you. Mwah.